Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Lead, Manage, and Thrive podcast. I'm your host, Joe Carter, franchise consultant, business strategist, and founder of the Twin Flame Group, along with a partner with the franchise consulting company. On this show, we dive into real conversations with leaders who are building, scaling, and adding real enterprise value, not just revenue. Whether you're a founder, executive, or future franchisee, you get the playbooks, insight, and mind shift shifts to drive substantial growth. Today, I am very honored to welcome Stephen Crimi, a growth strategist and enterprise architect focused on value-driven expansion. Stephen built his strategic expertise through roles as a franchise reporting analyst with Harris County, then senior financial analyst with Hometown Services. Today, he leads impactful growth engagements as the principal at SATC Consulting, where he works closely with owners and CEOs to turn data and insight into scalable, high value outcomes. He brings a unique blend of financial acumen and alignment frameworks that help organizations move faster, adapt smarter, and build lasting enterprise value. Stephen, I'm thrilled to have you. Let's unpack how you've turned those early analytical chops into growth first strategic playbook.
Sure, yeah. I'd say, a lot of it early on in my career was getting the right kind of training, that kind of thing. I've been in college three times. So I'd say I think the best way I kind of competed out there as a FP&A consultant is getting the right combination of skill sets. So one in data analytics, actually went into school for learning to know how to program and some advanced programming and data mining, like at Rice University. And then I got my two separate degrees in finance and accounting each, both my MBA and my undergrad. And so that's where the training started. But I also think it was just getting the experience and the ability to build value with the people I worked for. And then I'd been a consultant a few other times in my career, started on my business, just kind of figuring things out. But I did have, number of clients around the second and third times I've been in business for myself. And so I just think, yeah, being able to deliver value and learning from my experiences and being able to grow from them, just understanding what I could have done better and what areas could I improve on, that kind of thing, and being more like self-reliant, sufficient, even if I'm working for someone, like being able to find the answers and just being able to you know, figure out the solution on my own, that kind of thing. Learning to do that more often on my own as as in business for myself again for a fourth time. So yeah, I'd say that's kind of like a high summary, of my career so far. So and yeah, just getting those wins. So.
I love that, Stephen. Thank you for sharing your journey, your intro, your background. That's fantastic. We love hearing from people just like you, and our listeners love to learn from people who've walked in the footsteps of what they're attempting to walk currently. I'd love to hear, if you don't mind sharing, how have you merged qualitative insights and quantitative signals to uncover high leverage growth levers?
Yeah, so I'd say it's more of an art than a science in terms of incorporating quantitative and qualitative information when you're trying to make a decision and execute on your strategy. And so I'd say a good example I have of this is a client I'm working on recently, where I'm working with them on their sales strategy. And so right now, currently, their sales strategy has been like submitting as many bids as possible, and hopefully they'll get clients out of that and get some work and that kind of thing. And so I've been able to get all that bid data, create intelligible reports out of it, and use both quantitative information like the amount of bids that bids they've average monthly bids per employee, that kind of thing. How much sales they had per client, that for their contractors, how many of their contractors were clients, and going from being a bidder to a client, or someone they bidded for to a client, things like that. And then I use the qualitative information, for instance, like filtering the information based on like their closed deal rate, like the amount of deals they close. So, for instance, whether they had a relationship with that client, the close rate went from 9% if they had no relationship with the client to 26% if they had a relationship with the client. So a significant difference. So it's that art of utilizing the right kind of quantitative and qualitative information to help develop a sales strategy for this client. Again, remember they initially said they submit as many bids as possible. Well, now we can go from submitting as bids as possible to focusing more on developing relationships with our bidders, so we can increase the chance of getting a sale from that general contractor. Essentially, I shouldn't say bidder, but general contractor they're submitting bids for. So yeah, that's where that qualitative information, that relationship component, provides key information. Like we have a better chance of getting a sale if we have some kind of relationship with that bidder, with that general contractor. So yeah, that's I think it's again, it's just a combination of both. You can't just focus, over focus on like quantitative information, which I think can be an error that happens a lot in FP&A, focusing just on quantitative information and not enough on like qualitative, which is harder to measure, but still just as, pretty just as valuable.
I love that. 9 to 27, that's a pretty big jump. That's a huge success win and great case study right there. Could you walk our listeners through a different big initiative where you maybe had to align product, operations, and sales with that data that you talked about into one vision and how ultimately you were able to help your client pull it off?
Yeah, this was the third time I was in business for myself. I got a lot of my clients early on in my career through, I had a family member who had her own consulting business, and I would work with her on clients, or she referred me to clients, who needed more FP&A kind of help. And so she hired me this time to provide some FP&A consulting services for her. And I remember I created this report for her, and just generally she was growing a lot. She had a lot of growth and that kind of thing, but she wasn't making a lot of money, and she was spending a lot of time on her clients. And so she didn't have a good understanding of like how much time it took for her clients. So there was two things I was helping her manage here. One, the sales strategy, and one like her operations, like how she manages her nonprofits and her clients and other aspects of her operation and things like that. So on the sales side, helped create like a kind of forecast model saying like if she increase her charges this rate, assuming demand goes down, her clients can't afford that or that kind of thing. But assuming she gets the right amount, her revenue could essentially grow like 50% over the next 2 years. And so then on the operations side, I created something like a time schedule or something. It was like a model, a time schedule model. And we were making assumptions like, and she would have like 10 client meetings per week, and she thought that was like about 40 hours a week, but it turned out to be like 60 or 70 hours a week. And so we found out like the amount of preparation it comes and like spending on those meetings, making materials, that kind of thing, the costs and everything. It was more like, even though it's one client hour, it'd be like 4 hours of preparation. And so we got her to have a more manageable schedule to where she had like 5 or 6 client hours a session, and then she could do other initiatives of hers like her nonprofits and stuff. So it was helping her incorporate that. And so over time, over a couple of years, she did reach a 40% growth in revenue. So she did reach did reach like what I had planned out for her, and the strategy and everything. She did get close to reaching those numbers. And so I just think a big uh takeaway from that was just a lot of it's behavioral. Like you can have a really great plan, but it's just getting the buy-in and everything, and just working with them over time, and like just seeing the progress and everything, to where like they start executing on it more effectively. So, and being able to manage multiple things at once. So,
I love that. And generating 4% growth or 40%, excuse me, growth is a substantial increase. So kudos to you for that one. How about the opposite end of the spectrum? Can you share a time when maybe a strategy tanked, like it didn't achieve what you were attempting to accomplish? Like what did you drop? Where did you double down? And really, more important than anything else, what did it teach you?
yeah, I'd say the best example I have for this question is when I was working at
Steven, you still there? We lost you. All right. Well, that was a fantastic, example that you just shared with us, Stephen. I'd love to hear the opposite side of the equation too. Can you share a time where a strategy tanked, where it didn't work? What did you drop? Where did you double down? And really, most importantly, what did you learn from it, or what did it teach you?
Yeah, I'd say a good example of that was when I was working with Turning Point Strategic Advisors in 2023. I had been a senior financial analyst for them and worked on a number of financial analysis projects for them. And one of them was that they were a consulting firm that focused on turnaround situations. So they help provide clients with, help them get out of small to medium sized businesses, 1 to 100 million, out of types of financial spots and help them apply for new kinds of financing, that kind of thing. So I was working on a project. We're helping this construction company. This was an entrepreneur who had their company for 8 years and they were in some financial trouble. But the revenue was starting to tick up. And so we were trying to create a financial model and a plan that they could take to a bank and say, hey, listen, if we reach these numbers over time, if you give us this money and this kind of financing, help us get over the next few months, our revenue numbers are growing at such a rate where we can achieve these kind of financials and pay you back X number of years, that kind of thing. So that's essentially what we were showing. And some month or two had passed, and then eventually we got news from the client that they had lost a big client of theirs, and there was a drop of like 35% of their revenue. And so they weren't going to be able to reach that numbers. And like we tried to work the model certain ways, and there was essentially nothing we could do. And so we had to help them file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and it was a really tough thing. And so, um, it's really sad, honestly, because like this was someone who worked so hard, like poured their heart and soul in this business for 8 years, that kind of thing. And it was just hard to see it like come to an end for them. But I guess what that just provided, the biggest takeaway I got from that was just like you can have the right kind of plan, the perfect kind of strategy, and there could just be some kind of contingency you don't see or something that takes place, you know, where that comes in and completely derails your plan or strategy, that kind of thing. So luckily we were able to, help her file for bankruptcy and protect her assets, her house and everything. But yeah, it was just you know, contingencies like that happen. So, and it's best to have a plan B in those situations. So,
Love that. Thank you for sharing, because sometimes our biggest learnings comes from time periods that things don't go the way that we anticipated or hoped that they would. And I'm sure you know this. Strategy isn't necessarily always about just growth. It's about building value. So, how have you structured deals or stakeholders to help amplify enterprise value for your clients?
usually just I mean, I've always worked on those situations on the modeling and the planning aspect and yeah, working on the strategic execution. So, I mean, a lot of times we have found that like improving operational performance at you typically leads to improvements in financial performance, like, sales growth, profit margins, EBITDA, operating margins, things like that. And so, I mean, a good example that I'm working on right now, to how I usually put this into effect is I'm working on a deal with some investment bankers right now. They're trying to help their client sell their company. But in order to do that, their client needs to get back to being profitable. They have been profitable in the last 5 years. And so I created a comprehensive financial model for them. It's everything. It's the statement of cash flows, it's the balance sheet balances, it's the profit statement, a comprehensive financial statement over the next 5 years. And I added some tweaks to it, showing like, okay, they've had like cost discipline in their SG&A, where they brought it down from like, I don't know, 50% of revenue to 35% of revenue. So if we can do the same thing, keep it at around that level the next 5 years, and then work on their cost of goods sold as a percentage of sales and help bring that down from 72% to something like 49, 50% or whatever. Uh, within 2 years they can return to profitability. It's I don't have the numbers exactly right, but it's that's how the process is working. So we do have a plan in place. They're working with them on their financials now and everything, and they have this whole program, like step 2, step 3, step 4. They work with on sellers and everything that they're going through. But like as you can imagine, going forward, now that we have an idea of what area to target to improve financials, cost of goods sold, we're going to pick like the which I think it was 3 accounts, that are causing the major cost increases and stuff. Now we're going to create like reports and dashboards to help track that spending. And we're going to try to have more of a cost discipline regimen in place to where we can get, on a monthly basis, or we can help reach those profit goals, those over time within the next 5 years. So by the end of 5 years, they are able to sell at a decent multiple, and the owner can, finally, get rid of, be done with his company. So.
Awesome. That's a great example. What about, can you give us an example where a specific growth initiative led to a solid jump in an EBITDA? Like what were those metrics that were moved and why did they move?
I think a good example of that was when I was working for that conglomerate, Hometown Services. So they owned like 25, they had about 500 million in revenue, owned about 25 electrical and plumbing companies. They were kind of in that space. And so they were in acquisition mode. So EBITDA was a huge metric of theirs, the EBITDA of the business, that kind of thing. And that was something, because they weren't just trying to acquire the company, but they're trying, because they were owned by a private equity firm, but they were trying to spin it off within 3 to 5 years, that kind of thing. And so I remember a task I had was, excuse me, um, on four of new acquisitions. We just got them onto the accounting system, and so creating a model showing, they were all about sales growth, so showing different types of sales growth rates and how that would improve low profit metrics or cash flow metrics like EBITDA, uh, operating margins, net margins, free cash flow, things like that. And so over the on a monthly period, and then how that would look like, from one year to the next. And so I did this for four companies, and we ironed out the numbers, and then we would use this model, these numbers, as a basis to go to the controllers of those companies and use that to help them motivate their sales team to try and reach these sales growth numbers. This was a very sales oriented uh, company. They tracked a lot of sales metrics, in a lot of the meetings they had, and so yeah, we use these numbers as a basis for the narration. So over time, as I worked there, as I like inputted the actual, so we had these forecast numbers, and then like when April came along, I input April's numbers, and we would see that we were getting there. We were getting to those, EBITDA numbers that we were looking for um over time. So it was gradually getting there. It wasn't, sometimes they overshot and sometimes they undershot, within that time frame. But yeah, um again, those that was the best that's the best example I can think of, again, because they were trying to get their service providers were essentially their sales team. So they were trying to essentially train the sales consultant. So yeah, sales was a big driver of that EBITDA growth for that company.
I love that. I love that you mentioned leadership because, at least in my opinion, strategy lives or dies at the leadership level. What have you learned about building buy-in with executive teams that you've had the opportunity to work with?
I think getting small wins is real key, is getting to buy-in, because you're not going to hit that big home run over time, but getting those singles and doubles over time and just seeing the progress that's being made and showing that you're competent, knowledgeable, reliable, that kind of thing gets them the buy-in. I think the best example I can think of was when I was working, this was the third time I had been in uh, consulting on my own. And this family member, the one I mentioned to you earlier, she has her own consulting business. She recommended a client to me to do some kind of FP&A work for him, and so I just started out with a financial analysis. Like he had no idea what FP&A was or how I could help him, that kind of thing. But I started getting his buy-in because like I just started with a basic financial analysis, helping him explain his performance, operational and financial performance, that kind of thing, and what were major drivers. And he started getting bought in because there were things I was delivering him value. There were things that he didn't know about his gross margins or his business lines and all that, or his cost, that I was able to show him. And so eventually he trusted me to help come up with a sales strategy for him going forward, or a pricing strategy. That's what I was working on, a pricing strategy for him, going forward. And even though I didn't stay with him and work with him on the execution of it, that was again what my family member did. I did create the plan for them, and I did hear back over time. It was pretty successful and helping him, improve the top line of his financial performance. But again, I think the key was just getting those small wins and advertising it, or just making him aware of it, over time, and just showing that progress was being made. So,
Love that. Love that. What I've seen in my experience is a lot of founders and owners chase scale, chase revenue, but buyers chase value. How have you structured a strategy knowing that an exit was coming, and what mindset shift, excuse me, did that require for you and ultimately for the founder?
I mean, I can remember about times when I was working at venture capital, and even like when I do certain valuations for companies here and there, I think there's always a mindset of like there is going to be a sale at a certain point, for the business. But I know I have one example where I was a client was referred to me where yeah, the the sale was in mind for her on this business. This was a client I worked with. She was an interior designer and she had experience developing her own business. Like she had a carpet making business that she created and then sold off. And now she was developing a luxury furniture business, and I was helping her plan for that. And I remember that she had given me like some kind of P&L forecast, some financial analyst she hired or whatever created for her. It wasn't that great. And so I created something more comprehensive. And yeah, it was a financial statement model and also evaluation. So, and the valuation showed within 5 years what the equity value of the business would be like, assuming these numbers were met. And we use these numbers as the basis of our planning going forward. And so, I think, yeah, I think, the fact that she's trying to sell within 5 years puts a lot of pressure on the business to meet those cash flow metrics, like free cash flow metrics. And so, and instead of giving it more time, or assuming she's, holds it like 7, 9, 10 years or whatever, there's more pressure to perform and meet those numbers over time and to scale up too. Because that was the tricky thing with this project was like I mean, this was a luxury business, so it wasn't like these were like cabinets and tables worth 40 to $60,000. So these were like items that weren't very easy to scale off or, have a good jumping off point when she started her business. So it was interesting to make those numbers work or to have like a good plan in place where we could make them work. But yeah, I'd say yeah, just the fact uh I just think it put more pressure. The fact she wanted to sell in 5 years to to really scale up the business and really perform. I think that's a major difference versus like if she just wants to hold this forever or completely, you know, have this business for a longer period of time. So
Love that. Building with the exit in mind. I love that. Love that. For the founders that are listening in, what would be one step that you would challenge them to take this week to create more clarity or scalability in their business?
man, just try to find areas, activities within your business that where you can collect information, measure that kind of thing. Create some kind of feedback system where you can measure performance and maybe even set better targets and that are challenging and can help improve performance over time. Because I really mean it. Like improving operational performance usually improves financial performance over time too. And if you're trying to get in a better financial situation and all that, it starts with improving your operations. And the best way to execute on a big component of executing strategy the right way is information. So if you have no idea what if you're making progress or what kind of or what uh what level of activity you're doing or that kind of thing, you're just not going to know, and you're not going to be able to execute strategy very well.
Love that. Love that. Stephen, if someone wanted to learn more or work with you, where should they go? How should they reach out?
I recommend go to my website, www.stephenacrimi.com. That's where I talk more about what services I offer, and that's where they can reach me, or they can reach me directly at Stephen C at Stephenacrimi.com. So that's my business email. And they can always look me up on LinkedIn as well, Stephen A. Crimi, and learn more about my background and everything. So, if they feel like I may be able to help them with their, business or their situation, I'd be happy to have a conversation with them on that. So,
Love that, love that. And we will put all of those contacts into the comment on whichever streaming platform you may be listening to. Stephen, thank you for sharing your insights, your experience, your strategic mindset with us today. From financial analytics to high impact strategy, you have given our listeners a very powerful lens into what it really takes to drive sustainable, value focused growth. To everyone that's been tuning in, if today's conversation sparked an idea or challenged your way of thinking, please don't let it stop here. Rewind, take notes, and pick one action step that you can apply this week. And if you want to connect with Stephen or learn more about his work, head over to his LinkedIn profile, Stephen A. Crimi. This has been the Lead, Manage, and Thrive podcast. I'm your host, Joe Carter. Until next time, lead with purpose, manage with clarity, and build a business that thrives. Thank you.